Hey, this is Marlo with Velocity Education Group. Today, we're going to do a brief overview and presentation about our program, Preparing for Life After High School. So, let's get started. So, Velocity Education Group is a nationwide education service provider, right? We work with middle schools and high schools, as well as youth groups, nonprofit organizations, churches, all over the country, and we help students prepare for life after high school. So, the goal is for the student to have an actual plan and for the facilitators to be able to dial into a plug and play system that they can follow along for the year, without having to do any additional work. So we've taken all the work out of it. We built a really robust plug and play system, and I'm going to show you guys exactly what it is and what it looks like. So academics is great, right? And obviously we want to focus on education because education is important. But today's students, they need a little bit more than just academics. Students are graduating at an alarming rate without career planning, without financial literacy, without time management skills, without critical thinking skills, all things that we're going to cover in our platform. Employers report gaps in the following. Okay, 70% of employers reported that recent grads need additional training, while 85% of the students wish they were more prepared for the workforce and life in general. And that information came from the Holt International paper. Okay, some of the things that they reported gaps on was communication, professionalism, problem solving, and adaptability. So again, more things that we're going to touch on inside of our curriculum as well. So how do we prepare students before graduation? How do we start tackling these soft skills, right? Because these are things that they're not necessarily going to pull out in the school district or in the school system throughout the course of a day because they're focused on getting students from ninth, eighth grade to ninth, 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, or whether they're progressing them on to the earlier years. So the soft skills kind of go unnoticed. And if the parents aren't working with these students at home, to pick up these things, then they're going to rely on the youth organizations and people such as ourselves to fill in the gap with these skills so that the students don't go long term and look back and go, man, I wish someone would have taught me more financial management. I wish someone would have taught me more about how to communicate, how to be more professional, or what is college? What is a 2 year system? What is 4 years? What are all of my options, versus trades, or more traditional. So all of those things are things that we're going to get into in this curriculum. And again, it's plug and play. It's perfect, for once a week. It's perfect for once a month. And we're going to take another look at exactly what that looks like. But there's a lot of data out there right now about students or young adults who raised their hands and said, hey, these are things that I missed, coming up through the school system or just growing up in general. I wish someone would have taught me these things earlier. And you have employers saying, hey, we're noticing that students are missing these skills right here. So both of those areas we're able to address, with this program. So, introducing the High Flyers Club and why students should join. Okay, all of our schools and organizations or programs become High Flyer schools. So, when you join the High Flyers Club, your students are going to learn about career exploration, life skills, leadership, professional communication. There's financial literacy in there, goal setting as well. So, we're going to touch on a number of different things. And the reason that we kind of built and created this program was I myself was a classroom school teacher. And as I was working with students, high school students in particular, I started noticing a gap in these skills as well. So I was talking to my principal and I asked him one day, is there anything, what else can I do personally to try to impact these specific areas? And he said, hey, man, you have carte blanche. You do whatever you feel is necessary to do, for your students because I was teaching an elective at the time. So I went home and I started writing down a book called I Ain't Going to College because this is something I actually hear kids say all the time. I would ask them, hey, what is your plan for after high school? What are your plans? I don't know, bro. I don't really got no plan. Or, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. College, I don't know about that. That might not be for me. They're not excited about 2 years, 4 years, trades or anything. And I saw that not a lot of planning was going into that particular area. So I personally struck out and wanted to put together a system, a road mapper that would help students identify, and start thinking about the future and, what that would potentially look like. And if I put it together in a robust enough system, I knew that we could go into the school districts, we could go to these youth groups and organizations, and have an impact as well as just give people something to use to take the guesswork out so you don't show up every week, every day, every Saturday, every month going, hey, what are we going to do now? Right? What is the next step? What are we going to do with these guys? So you can go plug and play. So preparing for life after high school, it is a 21 module program. Okay, we have questions, quizzes, and video, all designed to educate, inform, and inspire our students on what they need to do to prepare for life after high school. And again, you have to start this process as early as you can. We work with students as early as fourth and fifth grade, all the way up through 12th grade. Right? It's never too late, but it can always you definitely want to start as early as possible. Okay. But obviously, it's never too late. You can impact the student at any point, across that cycle. But we believe in early intervention and early awareness. So the whole point of the program is we want students to dream big, have a plan for life after high school, and just start thinking about the future and what it looks like from a systematic, organized standpoint. We want to promote literacy because our students are not reading. So we want them to read. Career planning, plant the seed of higher education, again, as early as possible, as well as life planning and just thinking about everyday decisions that's going to impact your everyday regular life. Okay, so decision making is critical. Critical thinking, obviously is a big one, but it's a lot of soft skills that we're going to get into that are included here. Okay, so now we're going to switch gears a little bit and we're just going to get right into the demonstration. I'm going to show you, what it looks like to come on board with Velocity Education, what it looks like for your students to join our High Flyers Club, and we will take it from there. All right. So again, I stated earlier, it is 21 questions. I'm sorry, 21 lessons. Each lesson has questions, quizzes, video, and assessment. All right. And all of this is built so that a facilitator can take the children through the material in a fun, engaging, exciting fashion. Okay. And we just made it computer based because, most kids have devices, most folks have phones, and even if it's a summertime, program, or if it's an after school program, students traditionally can still use their school devices because it's just a web-based program. All they're gonna do is log in, to an online platform with the username and the ID, and then they'll be able to access the information. Okay, so as you can see on the left-hand side, this is the entire curriculum over here. You're going to see college, what's the point? This is a test environment, so you may see something that looks out of the ordinary, but you're going to see the chapter, you're going to see the quiz right after the chapter, which is the assessment. Okay. So if you notice, we start off talking about college, what's the point? And again, we're really talking about 2 years, 4 years, trade, certificates, everything that encompasses higher education, okay? Because that's what we want to support. And we want to help the children understand what path they're going to take for themselves individually. Okay, so that's what we want to do. We're trying to help everybody figure out, understand what is your next step and how do we support them. So college, what's the point? Is it starts off talking about that, and that really just gets into why should I educate myself and why is education important? Okay. Education is always going to be important. At no point in time will educating yourself not be an important factor, and will not help students move forward to the highest level, whatever those levels are for themselves. So but we also want to get into the social emotional learning component, right? So we dive back and we talk about the beginning of your life and what that looks like and kind of, where you are, because it's not how you start, it's all about how you finish. So we definitely want to tap into the hard skills of, studying hard, maintaining your grades, working on GPA, joining clubs and organizations, but we also have to talk about the social emotional aspect. What's going on at home? What happens in your environment, once you leave the program, once you leave school, right? Let's talk about the vision. What vision do you have for your life? Let's talk about recognizing your gifts. Everybody is good at something. We have to dig deep, reach down inside, help them find it, pull it out, and then give that gift to the world. So there's a whole lesson on that. Then we get into negativity, right? There's a lot of obstacles going on right now. A lot of different things going to happen, with our students and in their lives. Lights getting turned off, food deprived, transportation, being an issue. So what happens when you in those negative situations? How do you pull yourself up and continue to move forward? Okay. Insecurities. I'm not smart enough. I'm too short. My parents don't have the money, or we have these excruciating circumstances. So let's talk about insecurities, how to overcome insecurities so that you can start to again view and see education as an option and just see the importance of it. Okay. And then so on and so on. There again, 21 lessons that the students are going to pull from. Now, let's talk about the curriculum overall before we get into this first lesson. What we did was we wrote an actual story, okay? And this was pulled from our book, which is titled "I Ain't Going to College: A Guide for Life After High School for Middle and High School Teenagers." So what this is it's a curriculum, and it's about a young man who has a lot of challenges in life. He grows up in poverty. He's very poor. He doesn't have a good support system. He doesn't have a lot of resources around him. But internally, he has a drive and he wants to be successful. But he goes through the ups and the downs, a lot of pitfalls in life, a lot of different things happen to him throughout the story. But in the end, he finds success through education. And that is, the big piece that we want the kids to really understand. Look at what this guy goes through. He sleeps on the floor, he eats out of the trash, his parents leave him, at various times. He's washing his own clothes out, in the sink with a bar of soap. And he goes through all these different things. But in the end, he pulls himself up through education and he uses that and he harnesses that. And then he goes on to become successful, and live a good life. So letting the children be able to see themselves reflected in the material, because there's a lot of stories in here. And anytime, most of the feedback that we get is just that the students go, "Wow, man, my grandmother said that to me. Or, wow, I was in that situation. Or, wow, I had gotten, into it with someone and I didn't know exactly how to handle it." So it's a curriculum full of real world situations and real world scenarios, but then we bring it back around and show the students, you know, this is what happens when you stay diligent, you stay focused, you lock in on your goals, you have a vision, and you move forward, with your life, and you incorporate that higher education at some point. Whether it's 2 years, 4 years, certificate, trade, hair school, nail school, whatever it may be, we want you to have a plan for your life that's going to help you be successful. Okay. So let's just talk about chapter one. Chapter one says, college, what's the point? Right? So every section, you're going to have learning objectives. The learning objective here It says by the end of this chapter, students will be able to identify reasons as to why education is important and understand the concept of task completion as it relates to life. So I personally, I wrote this myself, right? And we had a team of educators who came in and kind of looked at it and said, okay, yep, this is good. We're going to change this. Let's move this around because we wanted to make sure they had an academic feel, but we really wanted to tell just a gritty street story about a kid, struggling and just trying to make it, and then show him go through his growth process and then have him show the growth of him overcoming. So that's what you're learning in this first chapter. I wanted to really break it down and get students to understand, like, what is the point of even educating yourself? Like, why should I even consider it? Right? Because there's a lot of things to go into getting the education. And what this chapter kind of breaks down and boils into is it says, and your employers are looking for people who know how to think critically, understand, how to complete a task, and understand how to get a job done. So having an education helps with those things. And it shows employers that you're someone who knows how to move through a system, good or bad, no matter what happens. It shows that you know how to overcome obstacles and that you know how to complete tasks. And if you know how to complete tasks, then when you come into the job says, hey, we can train you on the rest. We can give you, our core values, and we can give you the information that you need to be successful on this job, but we need the measuring stick and the parameters to see that you're able to retain the information, then go forward and think critically. That's what having the trades do for you. That's what having the degrees do for you. That's what having the certificates do for you. So that's what we break down in this particular lesson right here. Okay. So as you can see, the students are simply going to come in, they'll open their devices. You have a facilitator. They can do a turn and talk. They can get into groups and read. You can read out loud. You can take turns. The facilitator can read and have the students follow along. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. And we'll go over, the most effective ways to facilitate the program when we do our training. So the students are going to simply, have the access. They're going to read the information right here. Okay. And then, as you can see, it's written very matter of factly. It's not King's English. We wrote it anywhere between the third to fifth grade reading level, so that it could be accessible for everyone. Once they get through the reading, you're going to see different graphics in here. But again, we're talking about education, employment, which leads to job readiness, skills. What is a job versus a career, right? Going to McDonald's, working an hourly job versus being an accountant, and having an actual career. So we break those things down. We want the students to understand, what that looks like, because they may want to be more career oriented, versus just having a job, because a career is a path that you can see yourself growing in, getting promoted in, and having for a lifetime. A job is going to be more so short term, or something that you do to kind of get you from one situation to the next. And all of this, is broken down into the text as well. So what do those different things look like? Then we have the career connection, where we talk about different pieces that the students should have pulled from the reading as well. Then we're going to get them down to the finish line. Okay. Now, here we have our online worksheet. The worksheet houses the questions that the students are going to answer. They can answer in the online system. They can answer by writing it down on paper, or they can answer by talking it through and just speaking out loud in class. So let's say you've taken 15, 20 minutes. They've done the reading. Maybe you read out loud. You can say, okay, hey, Marquez, question number one says, in the comments section, talk about why you think going to college is important and make at least one reference to the text. Okay, what do you think about that? Oh, well, based on what I read, I think that, it's important to me because it helps you identify a career path, or it helps you identify a job, or it helps you identify a career, etc. Okay, good. Let's talk a little bit more about that. Now you have an opportunity to facilitate the conversation amongst the students, taking in a lot of different directions, whether you're talking about your own careers, the careers of the adults, that possibly may be in the room, but you can go in a lot of different directions with that. So it's three questions here. You can talk through the questions again as a group. They can give them some time to write the questions down and answer it. Then they can come up to the front. They can read their answers off. You can have dialogue that way, or they can answer right here in the online platform. The facilitator would see the answers. Say I'm sitting at the front of the room. The kids are, they're reading, they're answering. Then we're going to have the discussion, at the end. I see the answers coming into the system. Now I can say, hey, Talisha, you said that being a finisher was important, and a couple of things that you need to finish were your summer reading list, folding some clothes and stuff at home. Let's talk more about what that looks like when you finish those tasks. Okay. Being a finisher is a big deal, especially at the age group that these kids are at, because being a finisher correlates to finishing a degree program, finishing a trade, finishing, so that you've come to a completed point, right? You can't finish anything and be successful, well, you're not going to be successful if you don't finish. Okay. And again, that's what employers are looking for, someone who's going to come in, do the work, and finish the task. So you see how, being a finisher correlates, into employment, which correlates into education, which correlates, into degree programs. And if the students aren't finishing the small tasks at home, right? If you're not washing the dishes correctly, or you make your bed, but you don't finish, or you start cleaning your room, but you get sidetracked because you're on your phone. If you can't finish the small tasks, you're not going to be able to finish the big tasks when you get down to Michelin and they want you to run the big machine, or you're working somewhere in corporate America and you're working on a report. You're going to have to finish it all the way through. And that might take some staying up late. It might take some, late nights. It might take some early morning, but developing a finishing mindset and knowing how to finish is a huge skill that young people need to develop and that needs to be talked about more, but also in correlation with how it exists and works with these other pieces. Okay. So that's the online worksheet. Once you finish the worksheet, we have two activities down here, which is a deep dive and a think tank. Okay. These are just activities. And I'll talk about the think tank. Here it says, the author says a college degree is the general gateway to having a career versus having a job. Do some research and define job versus career. Also, let's do some research and give some examples of jobs versus careers. All right. Include a definition of a job, a definition of a career, and 2 to 3 examples that support what your definitions are. Okay. Think about that. You've got 15, 20 kids all in a group in a room together. They're all looking up on their phones, or maybe they're using devices, or maybe they're just talking through it. Hey, okay, you guys come up with some jobs. You guys on this side of the room come up with, 6 or 7 careers. Then we're going to talk through it as a group. Okay, working at McDonald's, or working at Wendy's. Okay, well, being a doctor, or being a lawyer, or being a judge. Here, you have a great opportunity to pull in some financial literacy, because you can say, okay, hey, let's talk about what a budget is, and let's build a budget based on a career or based on a job working at Wendy's that makes $15 an hour, and then let's compare that to a salary that a person might make as working as a manager, for a year. Let's look at that and let's build a budget, light, rent, water, gas. Let's compare the two numbers and kind of see, okay, this is how much it costs me to live, with a job. This is how much it costs me to live with a career. This is what somebody probably is going to survive on at a Wendy's, but this is what somebody may survive on and thrive on as an accountant. So again, when we go through the training, we get a little deeper into that and what that looks like. But just to give you, an idea, when you're talking about job versus career, and you're talking about salaries and hourly pay and how much money people make, it is a huge eye opener for students. And that's when they really are going to start learning and really start thinking about, okay, you know what? I think I want to lean more in this direction, or I want to lean more in that direction. So career exploration and job readiness Man, all these things are very key pieces in helping the students understand where I need to be once I'm done with high school and I'm ready to make those next decisions. And we've done a good job of laying this out so that we can get those juices flowing, give the facilitators, an idea of how to use that information to draw that information out, and then have fun while you're doing it. So the story is actually going to begin and start in chapter 2 when we actually start talking about, this young man and the beginning of his life and where he was living and what he was doing. And then it starts moving through some of the different scenarios that he was in, and it ultimately shows him rising above, and going on to school and doing well. So every chapter kind of functions the same. You're going to have questions, quizzes, video. There's video in here as well, and then it just kind of wraps up with the chapter takeaways. Okay. So every chapter is the same thing. It builds on the previous chapter, and I'll let me see if the video. I'll show you guys what the video looks like. There's just a down arrow right here on the side. All the students do is click on the video and it should pop up. I'm in a test environment, so I had to do something a little different. But this is what the video looks like. So, hey guys, so let's go ahead and get started, okay? You're gonna hear the school bell ring. That pretty much means that class is in session for every chapter, all right? So, chapter 1 is called College, What's the Point? What is the point? Why am I going off to school? Why am I attending a 2-year school? Why am I attending a 4-year school? Why am I going to hair school, nail school, HVAC? Maybe you're going to start off early and go to real estate school. However you decide to educate yourself beyond high school, that's what matters, okay? Now, let's talk about it from an employer standpoint. Employ Okay, so again, the video is made to be a recap. So after the student has done the reading, they've answered the questions, they've taken the quiz, they've had robust conversation with the facilitators. Um, then they can watch the video to kind of bring it all together. The facilitators can use the video as well to give them, further instruction and a better idea of, okay, what the information is about. But we do have a facilitator's training guide, which is a booklet that is available with the program as well. So we've really done a great job of, putting together the program, whether the students are going to be able to log in, they'll read, answer questions, take quizzes, learn the concept, learn the material, and then they're also going to have opportunities to watch the videos as well. So we get great feedback from the videos as well as the rest of the information and the material. And there's a toolkit that's here. It's got a lot of different things in it. There's worksheets and some other stuff that can be downloaded. So this again is just a short overview just to give you an idea of what the program looks like. Well, we can do a much deeper dive. Just get in touch with us and let us know what additional information you would like to learn. You can definitely book an appointment. You can do a demonstration with us so we can take you through the information even more. If I've already met with you and you have an idea of what this looks like and you're just reviewing the information for a second time, then fantastic. Hopefully you sharing it with someone else and you're getting closer to making a decision. But we would love to have your organizations come and join with us. So with that being said, you can visit us at www.velocityeducationgroup.com. All of our contact information is there as well. And we look forward to having you and your students in the platform. Thank you.